Dear gracious Lord, thank you for another beautiful day here in Big Bear and for the privilege to share your word. Pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts will be acceptable in your sight, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Well, I was going to preach right out there, but then I'd have half the congregation behind me. You guys, you're not going to get out that easy. So I'm going to preach from right here. Maybe I should turn it like this. Oh my goodness, the book of Job. As you might suspect, I'm going to conclude today our study of Job. We've been doing this for about 4 weeks. And I know at least 2 of you have ventured into reading the book of Job during this series. Anybody else? How many might have ventured into it? Oh, good. Janet's doing it too. Dave, all right, good. Fantastic book. So totally worth your time to just read it. And hopefully you might remember a few of the things we've shared together that would be helpful to you. Today is the grand finale. This is the conclusion. Job has been through so much, and today we hear about the restoration of his fortune. It's one of those happily ever after kind of endings that we long for in life, isn't it? Everything's brought back to him, more than he had to start with. And I thought, well, he lost his children. How could you ever restore that? But in the end, even he has exactly 10 children. So the story implies that he is totally restored. 7 sons, 3 daughters, 3 beautiful daughters, and 3 daughters who also received an inheritance. Something very unusual at the time. So in every way, this was a restoration story. As we were hearing the story read today, though, by Alan, something really struck me, and that is that all of this happened after Job prayed for his friends. It was really interesting. He'd had these friends, these know-it-all friends, give him all this great advice and tell him why he wasn't so innocent and why he deserved all this suffering. And at the end, 2 wonderful things happened. He prayed for his friends, and he saw God. He said in the verse that we heard was, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. That's the wonderful conclusion. Finally, he has come to a place of actually seeing that God is greater than he ever understood before. Which is really much of the lesson of this book. It's not to say that Job deserved any of his punishment. He was never really reproved God for protesting his innocence or confessing his innocence. He was never reproved for anything other than not understanding how great God is. In the end, that really was the reproof, that you just don't get it. You don't really understand the magnificence of the one you call God. But the theme I want to dwell on today is this theme of integrity. Integrity is where the story started back in chapter 1, verse 8. It goes like this. When God said to Satan, the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. In other words, he was a man of great integrity. And Satan's ploy was, I can show you that he's not a man of integrity. I can afflict him in such ways that it will just undermine his right relationship with you. God said, basically, have at it, right? Try your best. This is a good man. Well, I want to harken back to a story from my youth, because when I think of integrity, I always like to think of an illustration. And the funniest thing came to my mind yesterday when I'm thinking of integrity. It had to do with a sailboat. I wish Jim was here today, because he knows all about sunfish and Hobie cats, right? Well, when I was about 9 years old, I won a sailboat at a drawing at a filling station in Birmingham, Alabama. I was up there for the summer with my grandparents and my brother, and it was one of those things, where hundreds of people put things in the box, and then there's a grand drawing. Well, on the day of the grand drawing, I begged my grandparents to take me down to the Shell station so I could be there for the grand drawing. And it turned out I was the only person there. And miraculously, they drew my name. So I was the proud owner of about an 11-foot or 12-foot styrofoam sailboat with a sail in Birmingham, Alabama. The problem is I lived in Florida. So we had to go for a summer or two trying to figure out how to get that sailboat from Birmingham back down to Clearwater, Florida, where I lived. Finally, my parents and grandparents managed to do it on the top of cars. I don't remember exactly, but it ended up in the side yard of our house under the oak tree for several years. Because I was too young, my parents wouldn't let me take it out by myself. We did take it out a few times as a family just to have a good time on the Tampa Bay Causeway, and so I knew it worked, but I had to wait for a few more years until I was old enough to have it on my own. Well, one day, about the time I was in 9th grade, my parents let me take that thing out on Taylor Lake. It's a wonderful park in Largo, Florida, with my best friend Rex. I think they took us there because we were too young to drive, so somehow I got the boat to Taylor Lake, infested with alligators, by the way. And then I guess my parents left and said, just have a good time. I guess suddenly, from the time you're 9 into your 9th grade, a lot happens and they really trust you. So Rex and I set out on a rather windy day into the middle of Taylor Lake, and we were just going great guns. I mean, we were sailors. We knew we had the right stuff. But the problem is the wind was so strong that at one point it split the styrofoam boat in half. And so there I was in one half of the boat, and Rex was in the other half of the boat in the alligator-infested Taylor Lake.
Oh, jeez.
So we solved that problem by just extending our legs across the halves, and his feet came into my half, and my feet went in his half, and somehow, because the wind was still working, we sailed in almost underwater back to land. Something had happened to that boat, hadn't it, over time? It had lost its what?
Integrity.
Integrity. It had really lost its integrity. The beautiful part of that story is that years later, Rex went through a lot of problems with alcohol and, well, with drugs specifically, and ended up in prison when I was in college. Years later, I connected with Rex, and he had had a wonderful salvation experience, and now he is the president of a missionary school in Michigan. They train missionaries to go all over the world preaching the gospel in multiple languages. So that connection, to me, is a restoration of our childhood and also a restoration of that moment, which was almost the last time we were like best friends. He probably never wanted anything else to do with me after the sailboat experience. But our connection years later was a restoration. And to me, it was like an integrating thing. It was like, wow, that friendship has endured. And look at the work God has done in both of our lives over these years. Integrity. Integrity has to do with strength. It has to do with honor. It has to do with connections, vital connections. I've been reading a portion of a good book that Mary put me onto. It's called Living Strong, Finishing Well by Dr. Dave Stoop, a well-known Christian author and speaker. And he speaks to Job's story and this idea of integrity. And he helped me understand that the word integrity comes from the Latin root integer. Anybody a mathematician in here? Integer means what? Whole number. Yeah, an integer is something that's it is complete within itself. It's a wholeness. So integer is the root for integrity and also the word integrated. That's what Job's journey was really about, was coming to a place of wholeness at the end. That's what this wonderful restoration is all about. He's a man who has gone through so much, endured so much, but in the end, his integrity was what really mattered. We're in a journey ourselves, aren't we? When we look back over our lives, we have to integrate a lot of things, and some of those things are painful to look back over. Maybe it was a failure. Maybe it was a fracture. Maybe it was a sinful part of our lives or a big stumbling that we did. And sometimes to find integrity, we have to experience other things like what? Forgiveness, right? connection with other people, reckoning with our frailty, our humanity, so that we can come to a place of just authenticity. Don't be too hard on your younger self. I don't know. Anybody else tempted to do that? Look back over your life and give yourself a good whooping?
Yes.
Yeah. It's easy to look back and see the things you did wrong, but you know, those are the very things that got you to right today, and you're doing a lot right now. I look over this congregation and I think about each of you, and what I see are lions and lionesses of integrity. I see incredible strength in the people of St. Columba Spirit of Peace. In your life, in your lifestyle, in your desire to serve and be of use in the community, the love you have for God, the steadfastness to your community here in this church, integrity. As we work toward the latter parts of our life and we put things together, we have a wonderful opportunity that we didn't have in younger years, and that is to say who we are, not what we do. When you were, say, 30, 40 years old, somebody said, well, introduce yourself. What would you say? Well, this is what I do, right? This is my career. This is my family. This is my accomplishment. Now, as you get toward later years, you don't want to say, well, I used to be. That sounds like a has-been, doesn't it? Who are you now? You finally have the freedom to say who you are, to talk about the real person and what you've learned through your life, how you've come to peace with God, and what you look forward to still in your latter years. Yeah, you have a lot to look forward to. Let's not stop looking forward, right? Life isn't just that thing that happened behind us. Life is what we're experiencing now and moving into fullness of life. On this very day, 97 years ago, a man was born into the world who made a huge impact on my life, a man of tremendous integrity. And many of you have met him in person here. His name is Bob Sogard. Mary's father would be 97 today. I'm so blessed to have known a man of his caliber and decision-making. He lost his dear wife in 2004. And like many people, I'm sure he would have been tempted to just drown in his own sorrows. But then he later, about a year or two later, had his own personal medical crisis and again had to decide, am I going to let my life spiral downward in grief and doubt, or am I going to make something of these years? And he made a major personal decision, and that is to be outwardly focused with the remainder of his life. And so, as many of you know, and you've heard from Bob when he visited us, he sang in the choir forever. He was chaplain, volunteer chaplain. He led the community's bridge club. He led the food co-op. And he did many other things for his community and for his family. I got to know him in person before his death for, almost 9 years. I never heard a negative thing come out of Bob Sogard's mouth about life. He was a person who embraced life to the very end. And so I think of him as a man of great integrity. Doesn't mean he had to be perfect. Bob wasn't perfect. Job wasn't perfect. But they had an inner strength of being that was so authentic that when they got to the end, they could look back over their life and say, it is good. And I know that each of you want that experience. That's what I want in my life. I want to get to the end and look back and say, man, that was good. I did a good job, and it was great. And I thank God for every day of it. Integrity. What a gift. What a gift. So like Job, we have to see it. We can't just take it for granted. We have to see it and seize upon it. My eyes had heard of you, he said. My ears had heard of you, but now my eye sees you. See and seize that gift of integrity, and you'll have a life of no regrets. Amen.